To know for your food. Today, if you need to make cupcakes or something for school, one of the first brands that we were looking at was that I was able to use for him was Cherry Brook Kitchen. They make gluten-free varieties as well. This one is a yellow cake mix. This one is a gluten-free one, also Namaste brand. These are very minimal ingredients, and they have contained statements like this one from Cherry Brook Kitchen just says contains wheat. In terms of those major allergens, I'm sorry, most common allergens, and this one doesn't even have any of them. This is Namaste, and one of the very first brands that I was alerted to before I had even found those brands, or I'm not even sure if they existed yet. Another allergy mom pointed me to Duncan Hines Classic Yellow Cake Mix. Just specifically the Classic Yellow only says contains wheat. And they do call for vegetable oil and 3 large eggs. So that's what I wanted to get to next was, what do you do when you have an egg allergy or a dairy allergy when the box that you're trying to use, if you're not making a cake from scratch, calls for milk or eggs. I just want to mention one more before I move on to what those things are. Was another couple of brands are this King Arthur's Flour makes a gluten-free yellow cake mix that also doesn't call for, doesn't have anything listed in their contained statement. They don't have any of the most common allergens, including gluten and dairy and egg and soy, I believe. And these, yeah, they don't contain soy either. And this one, also like the other, calls for eggs and milk. So we're going to get to that in a second. This one calls for milk and eggs as well. It's an organics brand. This one also just contains wheat. So what do you do when you can't have milk or egg? Okay, usually the milk or the eggs is used for binding or for to help in the rising process. So what do you use for binding? Bananas. Bananas are awesome. Or applesauce. Sometimes I put both. I know my bananas are brown, but that's by design. As bananas ripen, they get more sweet. So they're perfect as adders for cake. They just can't get too black. When they start to get black, then maybe you should throw them out. These are actually on the verge, so I better use them soon. Applesauce is another thing that's great. Applesauce doesn't add any extra flavor that banana might. Applesauce works perfectly. If my recipe calls for 3 eggs, only one of these like small cups. This happens to be Musselman's unsweetened applesauce, because you don't want to add extra flavor since your cake mix is providing that already. My son, by the way, happens to love the spice cake mix, but not every kid does. That's why those yellow cake mixes are great. But anyways, talking about flavor. But anyway, going back to this, so just one of these for 3 eggs is the perfect amount. And in terms of milk, if you want something to be if you need like the thickness of milk, I use oat milk for Lorenzo. There's a Pacific brand oat milk that's awesome. But you can also use if your kid's not allergic to soy or almonds, they have soy milk, they have almond milk. If he has a dairy allergy, obviously, then you're not going to use regular milk. And so those are the replacements. But if you don't need it so thick, then you can just use water usually in a recipe that calls for milk, and it works just fine. One more thing I wanted to note was, like, when I'm using these cake mixes, so I have these replacements like apples and bananas, and even the oat milk, but I found a kid, there was a kid on my block that was allergic to apples and bananas, and he had never actually even had cake before, and he was like 6 years old, and he was ecstatic, so happy when I helped his mom make his first cupcakes for him out of using one of these mixes. I think it was the Cherry Brook Farm gluten-free one. And what we did was, instead of the egg, we used club soda, and it did the trick, especially in a cupcake. When you use club soda instead of the bananas or the applesauce, the cake mix can be kind of crumbly. But in a cupcake, that doesn't really matter. And the kid was just so happy, I can't even say. So, no fear food.